In the depths of an ancient cosmic ocean, where time itself had not yet learned to flow, where space stretched endlessly in all directions without form or purpose, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Before the first breath of wind ever stirred, before the first ray of sunlight ever pierced the darkness, before the first heartbeat ever echoed through existence, there was only the infinite void of potential. This primordial silence held within it all the stories that would ever be told, all the heroes that would ever rise, all the demons that would ever fall, and all the gods that would ever shape the destiny of countless worlds. Tonight, as you settle into the gentle embrace of sleep, you're about to embark on the most magnificent journey ever conceived by human imagination. We're diving into the vast, swirling cosmos of Hindu mythology, where creation and destruction dance together in eternal rhythm, where gods walk among mortals, where demons challenge the very fabric of reality, and where every story contains layers upon layers of meaning that have captivated minds for over 5,000 years. This isn't just any collection of ancient tales. This is the living, breathing mythology that has shaped one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations. These stories have been whispered by grandmothers to sleepy children, chanted by priests in sacred temples, carved into the walls of magnificent monuments, and passed down through countless generations like precious jewels of wisdom. They've survived invasions, weathered the storms of time, and emerged more vibrant than ever, continuing to offer guidance, comfort, and wonder to millions of people across the globe. What makes Hindu mythology absolutely fascinating is its breathtaking scope and infinite complexity. Unlike mythologies built around a single foundational story, this tradition unfolds like a vast cosmic web, with threads connecting creation myths to epic adventures, divine romances to philosophical revelations, and timeless moral lessons to profound spiritual truths. Every deity contains multitudes, every story branches into countless variations, and every symbol carries meanings that spiral deeper and deeper into the mysteries of existence itself. But here's what makes tonight's journey truly special. These aren't just stories to be told and forgotten. They're gateways into understanding the very nature of reality, consciousness, and the eternal dance between order and chaos that governs everything, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy. As you drift into sleep, these ancient narratives will work their magic on your subconscious mind, planting seeds of wisdom that will blossom in your dreams and beyond. We're going to witness the birth of universes and their eventual dissolution, follow gods as they incarnate in countless forms to restore balance to creation, journey alongside heroes whose choices echo through eternity, and discover how love, duty, sacrifice, and redemption weave together to create the most compelling stories ever imagined. By the time our journey concludes, you'll understand why these myths have captivated humanity for millennia and continue to offer profound insights into the deepest questions of existence. So close your eyes, let your breathing slow and deepen, and prepare to be transported to a realm where the impossible becomes inevitable, where divine beings shape reality with their thoughts and emotions, and where every moment contains the potential for both transcendence and transformation. The greatest story ever told is about to unfold. Our journey begins in that primordial moment before existence itself drew its first breath, in the infinite expanse of cosmic consciousness that Hindu tradition calls the absolute reality. Picture, if you can, a state of being so complete and perfect that it contains all possibilities while manifesting none of them. This is not emptiness as we might imagine it, but rather fullness beyond all comprehension, pregnant with infinite potential, waiting for the first stirring of creative impulse to set the wheels of manifestation into motion. From this ocean of pure consciousness, the first vibration begins to emerge. It's not a sound that ears could hear or a movement that eyes could see, but rather the fundamental frequency that will give birth to all frequencies, the primordial rhythm from which all rhythms will flow. This is the sacred sound of creation itself, the mystical syllable that contains within it the blueprints for every galaxy, every star, every planet, and every living being that will ever exist throughout the vast cycles of cosmic time. As this divine vibration spreads through the infinite field of consciousness, it begins to create the first distinctions, the first separations between what will become the observer and the observed, the creator and the created, the divine and the manifest. Like ripples spreading across the surface of a perfectly still pond, these initial movements generate the fundamental polarities that will define all existence: light and darkness, expansion and contraction, being and becoming, the eternal and the temporal. In the deepest traditions of this ancient wisdom, this moment of initial stirring is described as the awakening of the supreme consciousness from its state of perfect repose. Imagine the most profound sleep you've ever experienced multiplied by infinity, and then the gentle stirring that comes with the first hint of awakening. But this is no ordinary awakening. This is the cosmic consciousness beginning to dream, and its dreams will become the entire universe with all its myriad forms and phenomena. As this awakening consciousness begins to contemplate itself, it naturally divides into three fundamental aspects, three faces of the divine that will govern all the processes of creation, preservation, and transformation that define cosmic existence. These three aspects emerge not as separate beings, but as three expressions of the same ultimate reality, like three faces of a single precious gem, each reflecting the light of consciousness in its own unique way, while remaining essentially one. The first aspect to emerge from this cosmic awakening embodies the principle of creative manifestation. This is Brahma, the divine architect whose very thoughts become the building blocks of reality. Picture a consciousness so vast and creative that its slightest intention instantly manifests as entire universes, complete with their own laws of physics, their own dimensions of space and time, and their own infinite possibilities for the evolution of life and consciousness. Brahma appears in the cosmic vision with four faces, each gazing in one of the cardinal directions, symbolizing his all-encompassing awareness and his ability to perceive and create simultaneously in all dimensions of existence. His four arms hold the symbols of his creative power, the sacred texts that contain the blueprints of creation, the lotus that represents the unfolding of consciousness, the vessel containing the waters of life, and the tools of measurement that establish the proportions and harmonies that will govern the cosmic order. From Brahma's meditation emerge the fundamental elements that will compose all material existence. Space itself, providing the stage upon which the cosmic drama will unfold. Air, carrying the breath of life and the songs of creation. Fire, bringing the energy and transformation necessary for evolution. Water, flowing with the currents of emotion and purification. And earth, offering the stable foundation upon which countless forms of life will take root and flourish. But Brahma's creation extends far beyond mere physical elements. From his consciousness emerge the principles of time itself, establishing the vast cycles within cycles that will govern the rhythm of cosmic evolution. He creates the fundamental laws that will guide the development of consciousness, the moral principles that will govern the choices of sentient beings, and the intricate web of cause and effect that will ensure that every action generates its appropriate consequence across the vast expanses of space and time. As Brahma's creative work unfolds, the second aspect of divine consciousness begins to manifest its essential nature. This is Vishnu, the supreme preserver, whose very existence ensures that the delicate balance of cosmic order remains intact throughout all the changes and transformations that define the evolutionary process. If Brahma is the divine imagination bringing forth new possibilities, Vishnu is the divine love that nurtures and protects those possibilities, ensuring that they have the time and space necessary to fulfill their highest potential. Vishnu appears in the cosmic vision as the very embodiment of divine compassion and wisdom. His deep blue color reflects the infinite depth of his consciousness, like the boundless ocean or the endless sky. His 4 arms hold the symbols of his protective power: the discus that cuts through illusion and ignorance, the conch shell whose sound awakens consciousness from the sleep of forgetfulness, the mace that provides strength to the righteous, and the lotus that represents the pure heart that remains unstained by the muddy waters of worldly existence. The most profound aspect of Vishnu's nature is his infinite capacity for compassion and his willingness to descend from the highest realms of divine consciousness to intervene directly in the cosmic process whenever the balance between order and chaos threatens to tip too far toward destruction. This divine quality of intervention manifests through the principle of incarnation, the mysterious process by which the infinite consciousness voluntarily limits itself to take on finite forms in order to restore harmony and guide the evolution of consciousness toward its ultimate fulfillment. Throughout the vast cycles of cosmic time, whenever the forces of ignorance, selfishness, and destruction begin to overwhelm the forces of wisdom, love, and creative evolution, Vishnu descends into the world of form, taking on whatever shape and characteristics are most appropriate for addressing the particular challenges of that time and place. Sometimes he appears as a great teacher, offering new revelations of truth to guide humanity forward. Sometimes he manifests as a mighty warrior, wielding divine power to protect the innocent and defeat those who would pervert the cosmic order for their own selfish ends. But Vishnu's most remarkable incarnations are those in which he appears as a seemingly ordinary human being, walking among mortals, experiencing the full range of human joys and sorrows, facing the same moral dilemmas and spiritual challenges that confront all conscious beings in their journey toward enlightenment. These human incarnations reveal the profound truth that the divine consciousness is not separate from or opposed to human consciousness, but rather represents the highest potential that exists within every sentient being. The third aspect of the cosmic trinity embodies the principle that many find most difficult to understand and accept, yet which is absolutely essential for the continued evolution of consciousness. This is Shiva, the divine transformer, whose sacred function is to dissolve all the forms and structures that have served their purpose in the cosmic evolution, so that new and higher possibilities can emerge in their place. Shiva appears in the cosmic vision in many forms, each revealing a different aspect of the transformative power that operates throughout all levels of existence. Sometimes he is seen as the cosmic dancer, whose rhythmic movements generate the vibrations that keep all the particles of creation in their proper relationships, ensuring that the intricate patterns of energy and matter continue to support the evolution of consciousness. His dance is both beautiful and terrible, creative and destructive, maintaining the delicate balance between stability and change that allows life to flourish. In other visions, Shiva appears as the great yogi, seated in perfect meditation on the heights of the cosmic mountain, his consciousness absorbed in the deepest states of realization, demonstrating the ultimate goal of all spiritual practice. His matted hair contains the sacred river of divine grace. His third eye represents the wisdom that sees beyond all appearances to the underlying unity of existence. And his throat bears the blue mark left by drinking the poison of ignorance to protect all beings from its toxic effects. The most profound aspect of Shiva's nature is his role as the great liberator, the divine force that frees consciousness from all the limitations and attachments that prevent it from recognizing its own infinite nature. This liberation often requires the destruction of everything that the ego considers valuable and important, which is why Shiva is sometimes feared by those who are not yet ready to surrender their attachment to temporary forms and identities. But Shiva's destruction is never merely negative or chaotic. It is always the removal of obstacles to higher evolution, the clearing away of outdated patterns and structures that have become barriers to further growth. Like a forest fire that clears away the old growth to make room for new life, or like a sculptor who chips away the excess stone to reveal the beautiful statue hidden within. Shiva's transformative power always serves the ultimate goal of revealing the perfect divine nature that exists at the core of every being. These three aspects of divine consciousness, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, work together in perfect harmony throughout all the cycles of cosmic evolution. Their interplay creates the fundamental rhythm of existence, creation emerging from the infinite field of possibility, preservation maintaining the delicate balance necessary for evolution, and transformation clearing away the obstacles to higher realization. This divine trinity operates not only at the cosmic level, but also within every individual consciousness, constantly creating new possibilities, preserving what serves the highest good, and transforming whatever limits the full expression of divine potential. As we drift deeper into the realm of mythological understanding, we begin to see how these cosmic principles manifest in countless stories of divine beings whose adventures and relationships illustrate the profound truths about the nature of existence and the path to spiritual fulfillment. The cosmic stage now set with its divine architects, the next phase of creation begins to unfold in ways that transcend ordinary understanding. From the meditative consciousness of Brahma emerges the first stirring of individual awareness, the birth of countless celestial beings whose very existence serves to populate the infinite realms of divine possibility. These are not mere characters in ancient stories, but living principles of consciousness that govern every aspect of reality, from the movement of stars in their courses to the beating of hearts within mortal chests. In the highest celestial realms, where thought becomes reality instantaneously and desire manifests as tangible form, the great cosmic hierarchy begins to take shape. Here dwell the Devas, beings of pure light and consciousness, whose every breath sustains the fundamental forces that keep the universe functioning. They are not gods in the sense of beings to be worshipped from a distance, but rather elevated expressions of the same divine consciousness that exists within all beings, having evolved through countless lifetimes to embody specific aspects of cosmic wisdom and power. Among these luminous beings, Indra emerges as the king of the celestial realm, wielding the thunderbolt that splits the darkness of ignorance and brings the life-giving rains of divine grace. His magnificent city in the heavens serves as the prototype for all earthly kingdoms, a realm where perfect justice reigns and where every desire that serves the cosmic good is instantly fulfilled. Yet even Indra, mighty as he is, faces challenges and trials that test his wisdom and humility, for the path of evolution extends infinitely upward, and no being, however exalted, is exempt from the need for continued growth and learning. The divine feminine principle manifests in equally magnificent ways. Saraswati, throughout the celestial real, the goddess of knowledge and artistic expression, flows like a river of pure wisdom through all dimensions of existence. Her presence brings the gift of language, music, and all forms of creative expression that allow consciousness to communicate its deepest insights and most sublime realizations. In her hands, the Veena produces melodies that awaken dormant potentials within every listening soul, while her sacred books contain the accumulated wisdom of countless ages of spiritual discovery. Lakshmi embodies the principle of divine abundance, the recognition that the universe is inherently supportive of all life and consciousness. Her golden light illuminates the truth that prosperity, in its deepest sense, means the flowering of every being's highest potential. She appears wherever hearts open in gratitude and where actions are performed in service of the greater good, bringing not merely material abundance, but the far greater wealth of spiritual fulfillment and inner contentment. The fierce aspect of divine feminine power manifests through Durga, the cosmic mother who protects all beings from the forces that would lead them away from their true nature. Her multiple arms wield the weapons of discrimination, courage, compassion, and unwavering determination to overcome every obstacle to spiritual evolution. She rides upon the lion of fearless devotion, demonstrating that the gentlest love can become the most powerful force in the universe when it is called upon to defend truth and righteousness. Yet the cosmic drama requires more than divine harmony to unfold its full potential for teaching and transformation. From the darker depths of consciousness emerge the asuras, beings who represent the shadow aspects of existence, the forces of selfishness, ignorance, and the desire to accumulate power for its own sake, rather than in service of the cosmic good. These are not evil beings in any absolute sense, but rather necessary expressions of the choices that consciousness can make when it becomes identified with limitation rather than with its infinite nature. The eternal conflict between devas and asuras represents the fundamental struggle that takes place within every conscious being, between the impulses toward expansion and contraction, toward love and fear, toward wisdom and ignorance. This cosmic war is not fought with conventional weapons, but with the forces of intention, attention, and the choices that each being makes moment by moment about whether to align with the evolutionary impulse or to resist it in favor of temporary, ego-based satisfactions. One of the most profound episodes in this eternal drama unfolds when both devas and asuras recognize their need for the nectar of immortality, the divine essence that grants not mere longevity of physical form, but the deathless realization of one's true nature as eternal consciousness. Unable to obtain this treasure through individual effort, they enter into an uneasy alliance to churn the cosmic ocean, using the great serpent Vasuki as a rope and the sacred mountain Mandara as a churning rod. This churning of the cosmic ocean represents the intensive spiritual practice that consciousness must undergo to extract the essential wisdom that lies hidden beneath the surface appearances of ordinary experience. The process is neither easy nor pleasant, for before the nectar of realization can emerge, all the poisons of accumulated ignorance and negative karma must first be stirred up and dealt with. Terrible toxins rise from the depths, threatening to overwhelm both devas and asuras with their destructive power. At this crucial moment, Shiva performs one of his most compassionate acts, drinking the poison himself to protect all other beings from its harmful effects. The toxin turns his throat blue, giving him the name Nilakantha, the blue-throated one, and demonstrating the principle that advanced consciousness willingly takes upon itself the suffering that would otherwise overwhelm less developed beings. This divine sacrifice illustrates the profound truth that the path of spiritual evolution ultimately leads to complete selflessness and the willingness to serve the welfare of all existence. As the churning continues, numerous treasures begin to emerge from the cosmic depths. The wish-fulfilling tree appears, symbolizing the power of consciousness to manifest whatever is truly needed for continued growth and service. The divine physician Dhanvantari emerges carrying the medicine that can heal all ailments, representing the inherent wisdom within consciousness that knows how to restore harmony whenever it has been disrupted. The celestial horse and the divine elephant emerge as symbols of the refined energies that become available to consciousness as it evolves toward greater perfection. Finally, the ultimate treasure appears. Amrita, the nectar of immortality, carried by the divine being who embodies perfect beauty and grace. Both devas and asuras rush forward to claim this prize, but their competition threatens to destroy the very treasure they seek to obtain. At this moment, Vishnu intervenes in one of his most enchanting forms, appearing as Mohini, a feminine manifestation of such captivating beauty that all beings become transfixed by her presence. With infinite wisdom and compassion, Mohini volunteers to distribute the nectar fairly between the two groups, but her distribution follows a deeper justice than mere mathematical equality. She gives the nectar to those whose consciousness is aligned with the evolutionary impulse, while offering only illusion to those who remain trapped in selfish desires. This episode reveals the profound principle that spiritual treasures cannot be grasped by force or claimed as possessions, but only received by those who have prepared their consciousness to recognize and properly utilize such gifts. One asura, however, recognizes the deception and manages to consume some of the nectar before being discovered. In that instant, Vishnu's discus severs his head from his body, but because the nectar has already begun its transformative work, both parts achieve a form of immortality. The head becomes Rahu, and the body becomes Ketu, the shadow planets that periodically eclipse the sun and moon, representing the ways in which partially developed consciousness can temporarily obscure the light of wisdom and devotion. This cosmic episode establishes patterns that will repeat throughout the mythological cycles. The need for cooperation between opposing forces to achieve great goals. The requirement that consciousness undergo intensive purification before it can receive the highest spiritual attainments. The compassionate intervention of divine consciousness to protect evolving beings from overwhelming challenges, and the principle that ultimate spiritual treasures are distributed according to the recipient's capacity to use them for the benefit of all existence, rather than for selfish purposes. As these foundational patterns establish themselves in the cosmic order, the stage becomes set for the emergence of individual beings who will embody these principles in more personal and relatable forms. The infinite consciousness begins to manifest as specific personalities and characters, whose adventures and relationships will illustrate every aspect of the spiritual journey, from the first stirring of awakening to the ultimate realization of one's divine nature. The realm of the gods thus becomes populated with beings whose stories serve as both entertainment and instruction, whose conflicts and resolutions mirror the challenges faced by every consciousness as it evolves through the various stages of spiritual development. Their loves and losses, their victories and defeats, their moments of wisdom, and their periods of confusion all serve to illuminate the path that leads from identification with limitation to the recognition of one's infinite potential. The cosmic theatre now expands to encompass realms beyond imagination, where divine beings begin to explore the full spectrum of existence through countless incarnations and manifestations. As the great wheel of time begins its eternal rotation, consciousness itself starts to experiment with limitation, taking on finite forms to experience the joy of rediscovering its infinite nature through the journey of spiritual evolution. In this grand cosmic experiment, Vishnu emerges as the master of divine play, the supreme consciousness that delights in exploring every possible variation of the relationship between the infinite and the finite. His nature as the preserver extends far beyond mere maintenance of existing forms. He becomes the divine artist who paints reality with the brushstrokes of compassion, wisdom, and perfect timing. Each of his incarnations represents a unique masterpiece in the gallery of cosmic evolution, designed to address specific challenges that arise as consciousness explores the depths and heights of its own potential. The first stirrings of this incarnational principle manifest in forms that modern minds might find difficult to comprehend, yet which carry profound symbolic meaning about the stages through which consciousness evolves. When the earth itself faces dissolution beneath primordial waters, Vishnu descends as Matsya, the cosmic fish, demonstrating that divine consciousness can adapt to any environment and preserve the essential seeds of wisdom through even the most catastrophic transformations. This aquatic form swims through the waters of cosmic dissolution, carrying upon its back the vessel containing all the knowledge necessary for the next cycle of creation. As the creative process continues and the earth requires stabilization, Vishnu manifests as Kurma, the great turtle whose shell provides the foundation for the churning of the cosmic ocean. This incarnation reveals the principle that divine consciousness willingly serves as the stable support system for all evolutionary processes, bearing upon itself the weight of cosmic transformation, while remaining perfectly centered and unmoved by the turbulence that surrounds it. The turtle's ability to withdraw its limbs into its shell also symbolizes the yogic capacity for turning attention inward to discover the infinite stillness that exists at the core of all activity. When the earth becomes completely submerged and hidden beneath the cosmic waters, Vishnu takes the form of Varaha, the divine boar, whose tusks can penetrate to the deepest levels of manifestation to rescue what has been lost or forgotten. This powerful incarnation demonstrates the principle that no aspect of creation is ever truly lost or abandoned, that divine love will descend to any depth necessary to recover and restore what belongs to the light. The boar's joyful emergence from the depths, carrying the earth upon its tusks, celebrates the triumph of perseverance and the willingness to do whatever is necessary to serve the cosmic good. The fourth incarnation introduces a dimension of fierce protection that reveals how divine love expresses itself when faced with forces that would destroy the innocent and pure. Narasimha, the man-lion, emerges from a pillar at the moment when conventional solutions prove inadequate to address the challenge of protecting devotion from the abuse of power. This extraordinary form, neither fully human nor fully animal, appearing at twilight, neither day nor night, demonstrates that divine intervention transcends all categories and limitations when the welfare of sincere seekers is threatened. The story of Narasimha unfolds around Prahlada, a young devotee whose unwavering faith in the divine becomes a source of threat to his father Hiranyakashipu, a demon king who has received boons making him virtually invincible. The child's simple, innocent devotion to Vishnu enrages his father, who sees it as a challenge to his own authority and power. Despite repeated attempts to destroy his son's faith through torture, exile, and various forms of persecution, Prahlada's love for the divine only grows stronger and more radiant. The climactic moment arrives when Hiranyakashipu, confident in his invincibility, challenges the very existence of the divine that his son worships with such dedication. If your Vishnu is everywhere, he demands, is he in this pillar? When Prahlada affirms his faith that the divine presence pervades everything, the demon king strikes the pillar with his mace, and from within, it emerges the awesome form of Narasimha. This incarnation embodies the principle that divine protection operates beyond all conventional limitations and categories. Hiranyakashipu had secured boons ensuring he could not be killed by human or animal, during day or night, inside or outside, on earth or in sky by any weapon or hand. But Narasimha, being neither human nor animal, appears at twilight, neither day nor night, places the demon across his thighs, neither earth nor sky, at the threshold, neither inside nor outside, and destroys him with claws, neither weapon nor hand. The profound message embedded in this dramatic intervention reveals that when consciousness becomes completely identified with power and control, it inevitably comes into conflict with the innocent devotion that recognizes the divine presence in all things. The protective aspect of divine love will manifest in whatever form is necessary to ensure that purity of heart is never ultimately defeated by the abuse of power. Following this intense demonstration of protective force, the incarnational cycle takes a completely different turn with the appearance of Vamana, the divine dwarf, whose story illustrates how wisdom and humility can accomplish what force cannot achieve. King Bali, though born of demonic lineage, has become a model ruler whose generosity and righteousness have earned him dominion over all three worlds. His only fault lies in the pride he takes in his charitable nature and his failure to recognize the divine source of his prosperity. Vamana appears at Bali's grand sacrifice as a young Brahmin student, requesting only 3 steps of land as alms. The seemingly modest request delights Bali, who prides himself on never refusing any reasonable appeal for charity. But as soon as the gift is promised, the dwarf begins to expand, revealing his cosmic form as he covers the entire earth with his first step and all the heavens with his second. When he asks where he should place his third step, Bali realizes he has encountered the divine itself and, in a moment of profound surrender, offers his own head as the final step. This gentle conquest demonstrates the principle that divine consciousness prefers to transform rather than destroy, to educate rather than punish. Bali's surrender is rewarded not with destruction, but with elevation as he becomes the ruler of the underworld, a position that allows him to continue serving others while developing the humility that completes his spiritual evolution. The next incarnation introduces the complex theme of divine intervention in human moral development through the figure of Parashurama, the warrior sage who embodies the principle that sometimes forceful action is necessary to restore balance to society. Born as the son of a sage but trained in the martial arts, Parashurama represents the fusion of spiritual wisdom with warrior discipline, demonstrating that enlightened consciousness does not retreat from engagement with worldly challenges, but approaches them with both compassion and strength. Parashurama's mission unfolds during a period when the warrior class has become corrupted by power, using their strength to oppress rather than protect the innocent. His response to this social imbalance involves a systematic campaign to remove corrupt rulers and establish a new order based on righteous principles. This seemingly violent solution reflects the understanding that sometimes the structures supporting injustice must be dismantled before more harmonious arrangements can take their place. Yet Parashurama's story also reveals the limitations of solutions based primarily on force, even when that force is wielded by an enlightened being with pure motives. After accomplishing his mission of social reform, he recognizes that his methods, though necessary for their time, represent only a temporary solution to the deeper problem of human consciousness that tends toward corruption when not properly guided by wisdom and devotion. The incarnational cycle reaches a new level of sophistication with the appearance of Rama, the prince whose life story becomes the template for ideal human behavior in all relationships and circumstances. Unlike the previous avatars, who appeared primarily to address specific cosmic or social crises, Rama incarnates to demonstrate how divine consciousness can be lived through an apparently ordinary human life, facing the same challenges and moral dilemmas that confront every person in their journey through existence. The epic of Rama unfolds as a carefully orchestrated drama designed to illustrate every aspect of dharmic living, from family relationships and social obligations to personal integrity and spiritual surrender. Born as the eldest prince of Ayodhya, Rama embodies the ideal son, student, husband, brother, and eventually king, demonstrating how each role in life can become a vehicle for expressing divine qualities when approached with the right understanding and attitude. The central crisis of Rama's story emerges not from external enemies, but from the complex web of promises, obligations, and competing loyalties that characterize human social existence. When his father must choose between his love for Rama and his word given to his youngest wife, the resulting conflict forces Rama into 14 years of forest exile, just as he is about to be crowned king. Rama's response to this devastating reversal reveals the essence of dharmic consciousness. Complete acceptance of circumstances, combined with unwavering commitment to righteous action, regardless of personal cost. Rama's exile becomes a journey into the depths of human experience, as he encounters sages pursuing spiritual realization in forest hermitages, confronts demons who represent various forms of ignorance and evil, and eventually faces the ultimate test of his dharmic resolve when his beloved wife Sita is kidnapped by Ravana, the 10-headed king of Lanka. This abduction sets in motion a cosmic war that will determine whether righteousness or selfish desire will govern the world. The character of Sita emerges as equally central to the epic's spiritual message, embodying the feminine principle of devotion, purity, and inner strength that remains unshaken by external circumstances. Her voluntary sharing of Rama's exile demonstrates the principle that true partnership involves complete mutual support in pursuing the highest values, regardless of the personal sacrifices required. Her conduct during captivity in Lanka reveals that genuine purity cannot be contaminated by external circumstances, no matter how threatening or degrading they may appear. The search for Sita leads Rama to encounter Hanuman, whose character represents the transformative power of pure devotion when it recognizes and serves the divine presence in human form. Hanuman's supernatural abilities, including the power to fly across oceans and assume any size, symbolize the extraordinary capacities that become available to consciousness when it is completely aligned with divine will rather than personal desire. Hanuman's leap across the ocean to reach Lanka represents one of mythology's most inspiring episodes of faith, overcoming impossible obstacles through the power of devotion and service. His discovery of Sita in the Ashoka Grove and his delivery of Rama's message demonstrate how pure devotion becomes the perfect messenger between separated aspects of divine consciousness. His subsequent adventures in Lanka, including his capture and escape, reveal how devotional consciousness can turn apparent defeats into victories through its unwavering focus on serving the beloved. The war that follows brings together vast armies representing all the forces of righteousness and selfishness in a conflict that will determine the future direction of cosmic evolution. The alliance between Rama and Sugriva, the Monkey King, illustrates how divine consciousness naturally attracts the support of all beings whose hearts are aligned with dharmic principles, regardless of their external forms or social status. The climactic battle between Rama and Ravana represents far more than a simple conflict between good and evil. Ravana, despite his demonic nature, possesses genuine spiritual attainments and scholarly knowledge, making him a complex figure who demonstrates how even advanced consciousness can become corrupted when it serves ego rather than the cosmic good. His 10 heads symbolize the multiplication of desires and the fragmentation of attention that occurs when consciousness becomes identified with accumulation rather than service. The eventual victory of Rama establishes the principle that dharmic consciousness, though it may face severe trials and apparent defeats, ultimately possesses an invincible power that derives from its alignment with the fundamental structure of reality itself. The cosmic order supports righteousness, not because it is conventional or socially approved, but because it represents the natural expression of consciousness that has recognized its unity with all existence. Yet the epic does not end with military victory, but continues to explore the complexities of living dharmic principles in the practical world of human relationships and social expectations. Rama's treatment of Sita, following her rescue, raises profound questions about the relationship between personal truth and social perception, between inner purity and external validation, that continue to challenge readers to examine their own understanding of righteousness and justice. Human consciousness faces another profound test when Rama must choose between his personal knowledge of Sita's purity and the doubts expressed by his subjects about her conduct during captivity. His decision to ask her to prove her innocence through trial by fire reveals the tragic tension that can arise when even the most dharmic individuals must navigate between competing obligations and values in an imperfect world. The fire ordeal that follows demonstrates the principle that truth has its own power to vindicate itself when consciousness remains aligned with dharmic principles regardless of external pressures. Sita's emergence from the flames unharmed, blessed by the fire god himself, provides cosmic confirmation of her purity, while simultaneously revealing the painful cost of maintaining dharmic principles in a world governed by appearance and social opinion. The eventual return to Ayodhya and Rama's coronation establish the ideal of Ramrajya, the perfect kingdom where righteousness governs all relationships and activities. Yet even this apparently happy ending contains within it the seeds of further testing, as the challenges of maintaining dharmic consciousness continue throughout every phase of existence, requiring constant vigilance and renewal of commitment to the highest principles. The story of Rama thus becomes a complete manual for dharmic living, illustrating through concrete situations and relationships how divine consciousness can be embodied in human form, while facing all the complexities and contradictions that characterize existence in the world of form. Every character in the epic represents an aspect of the spiritual journey. Every situation reveals principles that apply to the moral and spiritual challenges faced by every conscious being, and every resolution points toward the ultimate goal of realizing one's divine nature through perfect alignment with cosmic Dharma. As the echoes of Rama's dharmic victory resonate through the cosmic dimensions, the wheel of time continues its relentless rotation, preparing to manifest the most complex and profound incarnation that divine consciousness will ever assume. The stage of existence expands beyond the scope of individual heroism to encompass the vast canvas of human civilization itself, where entire societies, kingdoms, and generations become players in a cosmic drama that will test every principle of righteousness against the harsh realities of power, ambition, and the eternal struggle between duty and desire. In the sacred land of Bharata, where the rivers flow like liquid wisdom and the mountains stand as silent witnesses to countless ages of spiritual evolution, the ancient lineage of kings faces its greatest challenge. The bloodline that has maintained cosmic order through generations of righteous rule now confronts a crisis that threatens not only political stability, but the very foundation of dharmic civilization itself. This is no longer the story of a single hero's journey, but the epic tale of an entire culture grappling with questions that have no easy answers, where every choice carries consequences that ripple through generations. The city of Hastinapura emerges as the focal point of this cosmic drama, a magnificent capital where the accumulated wisdom of ages has created a civilization of unprecedented sophistication and spiritual development. Here, the ancient knowledge of governance, warfare, philosophy, and spiritual practice has reached its highest expression, creating a society where divine principles are meant to guide every aspect of human activity. Yet within this apparent perfection, the seeds of conflict begin to germinate, revealing the eternal truth that even the most advanced civilizations must face the fundamental challenges inherent in conscious existence. The royal palace becomes the stage for a family drama that will expand to encompass the destiny of the entire world. Two brothers, both noble and well-intentioned, represent different approaches to the challenges of leadership and spiritual evolution. Dhritarashtra, born blind but possessed of a powerful intellect and deep emotional nature, embodies the principle of consciousness that struggles with the limitations imposed by its own attachments and desires. His blindness serves as more than a physical condition. It symbolizes the way that even advanced consciousness can become unable to see clearly when personal preferences and emotional bonds cloud the perception of dharmic truth. His brother Pandu, whose name means pale, represents the complementary principle of consciousness that has achieved a certain detachment from worldly desires, but faces its own challenges in maintaining the balance between spiritual aspiration and worldly responsibility. The contrast between these two brothers establishes the fundamental tension that will drive the entire epic. The challenge of living spiritual principles in a world where personal relationships, political necessities, and cosmic purposes often seem to conflict with one another. The generation of their children carries this tension to its ultimate expression through the emergence of two groups of cousins, whose very existence embodies the eternal conflict between dharmic and adharmic consciousness. The 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, known collectively as the Kauravas, represent the multiplication of ego consciousness that occurs when awareness becomes identified with accumulation, control, and the satisfaction of personal desires at the expense of cosmic harmony. Their leader, Duryodhana, emerges as a complex figure whose genuine abilities and positive qualities become corrupted by jealousy, pride and the inability to accept that true greatness comes through service rather than domination. In contrast, the 5 sons of Pandu, called the Pandavas, represent the integration of different aspects of evolved consciousness, working together in harmony toward the common goal of establishing righteousness in the world. Each brother embodies a specific divine quality that becomes essential for the complete expression of dharmic leadership. Yudhishthira, the eldest, represents the principle of unwavering commitment to truth and justice, even when such commitment leads to apparently disastrous consequences. His character reveals both the nobility and the potential tragic limitations of consciousness that refuses to compromise its principles regardless of practical considerations. Bhima embodies the principle of strength and courage that serves dharmic purposes, demonstrating how physical and emotional power can become instruments of righteousness when properly directed by wisdom and compassion. His tremendous appetite for both food and battle symbolizes the healthy expression of life force that delights in overcoming obstacles and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Yet his character also reveals the importance of tempering strength with discrimination, as his impulsive nature sometimes creates complications that require the wisdom of his brothers to resolve. Arjuna emerges as perhaps the most complex and spiritually significant of the Pandava brothers, representing the consciousness that has developed extraordinary skill and capability, but must learn to surrender personal will to divine guidance. His mastery of archery becomes a metaphor for the focused attention and disciplined practice required for spiritual realization, while his struggles with doubt and moral confusion reveal the challenges faced by every sincere seeker who attempts to live spiritual principles in the complex world of action and relationship. The twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, represent the complementary aspects of beauty and wisdom that complete the spectrum of qualities necessary for ideal leadership. Their presence in the group demonstrates that dharmic consciousness includes appreciation for aesthetic harmony and deep knowledge of both practical and esoteric subjects. Together, the 5 brothers create a mandala of consciousness that represents the potential for human awareness to embody divine qualities, while remaining fully engaged with worldly responsibilities. The introduction of Draupadi as their common wife adds another layer of complexity to the epic's exploration of consciousness and relationship. Born from the sacred fire of her father's sacrifice, she represents the divine feminine principle that inspires and challenges masculine consciousness to evolve beyond conventional limitations. Her unprecedented marriage to 5 brothers symbolizes the integration of different aspects of consciousness around a common spiritual purpose, while her fierce intelligence and unwavering commitment to dharmic principles make her an active participant in the cosmic drama rather than a passive object of protection. The education of these remarkable young people unfolds under the guidance of teachers whose own characters embody the complexities and contradictions inherent in the transmission of wisdom across generations. Drona, the master archer who trains both groups of cousins in the martial arts, represents the principle of technical expertise that must grapple with competing loyalties and obligations. His favoritism towards certain students and his involvement in political machinations reveal how even advanced knowledge can become compromised when it serves personal rather than cosmic purposes. Kripacharya embodies the principle of steady, reliable wisdom that provides continuity and stability through changing circumstances, while Bhishma represents the tragic nobility of consciousness that has made absolute commitments based on limited understanding of their ultimate consequences. His vow of celibacy and lifetime service to the throne of Hastinapura, made with the highest motives, eventually forces him to support adharmic actions that violate his deepest moral convictions. The tournament where the young princes demonstrate their skills becomes a pivotal moment in the unfolding cosmic drama, revealing not only their individual capabilities, but also the deep undercurrents of rivalry and resentment that will eventually explode into universal conflict. The mysterious appearance of Karna at this crucial moment introduces another layer of complexity to the tale, as his extraordinary abilities and noble character become aligned with the adharmic forces due to the social prejudices and personal slights that have shaped his development. Karna's story reveals the tragic consequences that arise when society fails to recognize and properly nurture spiritual potential due to superficial considerations of birth and social status. His loyalty to Duryodhana, despite his awareness of the moral problems with his friend's behavior, demonstrates how even the most noble consciousness can become trapped by gratitude and personal bonds that conflict with dharmic principles. The irony that he is actually Arjuna's elder brother, born of the same divine father, adds another dimension to the epic's exploration of how ignorance of true relationships creates unnecessary conflicts and suffering. The arrival of Krishna in the epic marks the transition from human drama to cosmic revelation, as the supreme consciousness incarnates in apparently human form to guide the evolutionary process towards its destined fulfillment. Unlike the previous incarnations of Vishnu, which appeared primarily to address specific crises through dramatic of divine consciousness that works through relationship interventions, Krishna's manifestation represents the principle education and the gradual transformation of awareness rather than through overwhelming displays of supernatural power. Krishna's childhood and youth in Vrindavan reveal the playful, joyous aspect of divine consciousness that delights in the simple pleasures of existence, while simultaneously demonstrating powers that transcend all natural limitations. His adventures with the cowherd boys and his divine romance with the gopis illustrate the principle that spiritual realization involves not the rejection of life's pleasures, but their transformation through the recognition of their divine source and purpose. The stories of Krishna lifting Mount Govardhan to protect the villagers from Indra's storms, defeating various demons who threaten the peaceful community, and performing countless other miraculous acts, all while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary village boy, demonstrate the way that divine consciousness operates simultaneously on multiple levels of reality. His ability to multiply himself to dance simultaneously with thousands of gopis reveals the infinite capacity of divine love to give itself completely to every individual consciousness without diminishment or favoritism. Yet Krishna's true significance in the epic emerges through his role as counselor, strategist, and spiritual guide to the Pandavas during their struggles with the forces of Adharma. His interventions in their affairs always respect their free will, while providing the wisdom and support necessary for them to make choices aligned with their highest spiritual development. His protection of Draupadi during her humiliation in the royal court demonstrates the principle that divine grace responds instantaneously to sincere surrender, providing whatever support is truly needed for consciousness to maintain its dharmic orientation despite overwhelming challenges. The gradual escalation of conflict between the Kauravas and Pandavas reveals the inexorable way that small compromises with adharmic principles eventually lead to massive consequences that affect entire civilizations. The gambling match that results in the Pandavas losing their kingdom and Draupadi's public humiliation represents a turning point where the tolerance of injustice reaches its limit and the forces of cosmic correction begin to mobilize for decisive action. The 13 years of exile and incognito living that follow provide opportunities for the Pandavas to develop qualities and relationships that will prove essential for their ultimate mission of restoring dharmic order to the world. Their encounters with sages in the forest deepen their spiritual understanding, while their year of disguised service in King Virata's court tests their ability to maintain their true identity while adapting to apparently diminished circumstances. Throughout this period of preparation, Krishna continues to guide events from behind the scenes, ensuring that all the necessary elements align for the cosmic drama that will soon unfold. His diplomatic mission to prevent war demonstrates that divine consciousness always seeks peaceful solutions to conflicts, but also reveals that when adharmic forces become completely entrenched in their positions, more dramatic forms of intervention become inevitable. The great battlefield of Kurukshetra emerges as the chosen stage for this cosmic confrontation, a sacred space where the accumulated karma of countless lifetimes will find its resolution through 18 days of conflict that will determine the future direction of human civilization. The armies that gather represent not merely political alliances, but cosmic principles aligning themselves for the ultimate test of whether consciousness will evolve toward greater harmony and wisdom or descend into chaos and destruction. And as the two vast armies face each other across the field of destiny, the true magnitude of what is about to unfold begins to dawn on those who possess the vision to perceive beyond surface appearances. This is not simply a war between cousins or even between kingdoms, but a cosmic battle between different approaches to existence itself, where every choice made by every participant will have consequences that extend far beyond their individual lives, into the very fabric of reality itself. The moment of ultimate crisis arrives when Arjuna, the greatest warrior of his age, and the one upon whom victory depends, suddenly confronts the full implications of what he is about to do. Seeing his beloved teachers, relatives, and friends arrayed on both sides of the battlefield, he experiences a complete collapse of his will to fight, recognizing that victory in this war will require him to destroy everything he has been taught to love and respect. This moment of Arjuna's despair sets the stage for the most profound spiritual teaching ever delivered, as Krishna reveals his true nature and shares the ultimate secrets of existence with a consciousness that has become completely receptive through its encounter with the fundamental paradoxes of embodied spiritual life. The dialogue that unfolds between the human soul in crisis and divine consciousness in perfect wisdom becomes the philosophical and spiritual heart of the entire epic, containing within it the essential principles that can guide any consciousness toward liberation from the illusions that create suffering and limitation. The teachings that emerge from this sacred dialogue address every aspect of the spiritual path, from the nature of action and duty to the ultimate reality that underlies all apparent diversity and conflict. Krishna's revelation of his cosmic form demonstrates that divine consciousness contains within itself all possibilities and all beings, making it impossible for any action performed in alignment with dharmic principles to cause ultimate harm to anything or anyone. The war that follows this divine revelation unfolds as a cosmic ritual in which each day's battle reveals different aspects of the eternal struggle between evolutionary and devolutionary forces within consciousness itself. The complex strategies, individual combats, and moral dilemmas that characterize the 18-day conflict serve to illustrate every conceivable situation in which spiritual principles must be applied under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The strategic brilliance of Krishna's guidance during the war reveals itself not through conventional military tactics alone, but through a profound understanding of how consciousness must navigate the complex terrain between absolute spiritual principles and the practical necessities of embodied existence. Each day of battle presents new challenges that test different aspects of dharmic understanding, forcing the participants to discover within themselves resources they never knew they possessed, while simultaneously revealing the tragic costs that accompany even righteous victory. The opening day establishes patterns that will echo throughout the entire conflict. As great warriors who have spent lifetimes perfecting their skills in service of dharmic ideals find themselves compelled to use those very abilities against teachers, friends, and family members who have aligned themselves with adharmic forces. The arrows that fly across the battlefield carry with them not merely the intention to defeat enemies, but the accumulated karma of countless relationships and obligations that have become impossibly tangled through the choices made by previous generations. Bhishma, the grandsire whose very name means the terrible vow, embodies the tragedy of consciousness that has committed itself so completely to a particular interpretation of duty that it cannot adapt when circumstances reveal the limitations of that interpretation. His leadership of the Kaurava forces, despite his personal knowledge of their adharmic motivations, demonstrates how even the most evolved beings can become trapped by their own noble commitments when those commitments are made without full understanding of their ultimate consequences. The psychological warfare that accompanies the physical combat reveals the deeper battle taking place within the consciousness of every participant. Warriors who have trained together, learned from the same teachers, and shared the bonds of family and friendship must now overcome their natural reluctance to harm those they love in order to serve the greater good of cosmic order. This internal struggle proves far more challenging than any external enemy, requiring each individual to discover within themselves the discrimination necessary to distinguish between the eternal essence of their opponents and the temporary roles those opponents have chosen to play in the cosmic drama. Drona's command of the Kaurava forces after Bhishma's fall introduces new dimensions of strategic complexity, as his intimate knowledge of his former students' strengths and weaknesses creates tactical advantages that must be overcome through methods that transcend conventional military thinking. The formation of the Chakravyuha, an intricate circular battle array designed to trap and destroy enemies, becomes a metaphor for the way that ignorance creates elaborate structures designed to prevent consciousness from recognizing its own divine nature. The tragedy of Abhimanyu, Arjuna's young son who possesses the knowledge to enter the formation but not to exit it, reveals how partial understanding can become more dangerous than complete ignorance when consciousness faces challenges that require total mastery of spiritual principles. His heroic death, after single-handedly battling multiple great warriors, demonstrates the principle that even apparent defeat can serve the cosmic purpose when it is endured with perfect courage and devotion to dharmic ideals. The escalating intensity of each successive day's fighting reflects the way that cosmic forces, once set in motion, develop their own momentum that carries events beyond the control of individual participants. What begins as a conflict between specific groups gradually expands to encompass the entire civilization, drawing in allies and enemies from the farthest reaches of the known world, until the battle becomes a truly universal struggle between all the forces that support consciousness evolution and all those that resist it. Karna's eventual leadership of the Kaurava forces brings to the forefront the epic's exploration of how noble qualities can become perverted when they serve adharmic purposes. His extraordinary generosity, unwavering loyalty, and tremendous martial skills make him one of the most admirable characters in the entire story. Yet his commitment to friendship with Duryodhana prevents him from recognizing the larger cosmic purpose that his abilities should serve. His death at Arjuna's hands represents not the triumph of good over evil, but the tragic necessity of destroying even admirable qualities when they become obstacles to the evolution of consciousness. The systematic elimination of great warriors from both sides reveals the principle that cosmic transformation requires the clearing away of old patterns and structures, even those that have served positive purposes in the past. Each death on the battlefield represents the dissolution of a particular approach to living that, while perhaps appropriate for earlier stages of evolution, has become inadequate for the new phase of cosmic development that the war is designed to inaugurate. Duryodhana's final single combat with Bhima brings the personal dimension of the conflict to its ultimate resolution, as the representative of ego consciousness faces the embodiment of dharmic strength in a battle that will determine which principle will govern the future. The controversial circumstances of Duryodhana's defeat, achieved through Bhima's violation of the conventional rules of combat, raise profound questions about whether dharmic ends can justify adharmic means, and challenge every participant to examine their own understanding of righteousness. The aftermath of victory proves as challenging as the battle itself, as the surviving Pandavas must confront the devastating cost of their triumph. The sight of the battlefield strewn with the bodies of virtually everyone they have ever known and loved forces them to grapple with the question of whether any victory can be worth such destruction. regardless of how noble the cause it serves. Their grief and questioning reflect the natural response of consciousness that has achieved its stated goals, only to discover that victory brings its own forms of suffering and responsibility. Gandhari's curse upon Krishna, blaming him for allowing the destruction to occur when his divine power could have prevented it, introduces the theme of divine responsibility and the mysterious ways in which cosmic consciousness permits terrible events to unfold in service of purposes that transcend individual understanding. Krishna's acceptance of the curse and his explanation that the war was necessary to clear away accumulated negative karma reveals the principle that divine intervention operates according to laws that consider the welfare of consciousness across vast spans of time rather than immediate comfort and happiness. The coronation of Yudhishthira as emperor establishes the ideal of dharmic governance, where political power serves the spiritual evolution of all beings, rather than the preferences of rulers or the demands of particular groups. His reluctance to assume the throne despite his clear qualifications demonstrates the principle that true spiritual authority emerges not from ambition or desire for control, but from the recognition that leadership represents an opportunity for service that cannot be refused when cosmic circumstances require it. The Ashwamedha sacrifice performed to legitimize Yudhishthira's rule reveals the ancient understanding of how spiritual practices can transform political power from a source of corruption into an instrument of cosmic harmony. The elaborate ritual, with its careful attention to symbolic details and its requirement for the participation of representatives from throughout the known world, demonstrates the principle that legitimate authority must be recognized and accepted by consciousness at every level, rather than imposed through force alone. Yet even the establishment of ideal governance cannot resolve all the contradictions inherent in embodied existence, as the continuing challenges faced by the Pandavas in their rule reveal. The tensions between justice and mercy, between individual rights and collective welfare, between immediate needs and long-term consequences, continue to require constant attention and discrimination from consciousness that seeks to maintain dharmic principles while dealing with the practical necessities of governing diverse populations with conflicting interests and varying levels of spiritual development. The gradual aging of the great generation that fought the war introduces the theme of temporal limitation and the way that even the most evolved consciousness must eventually surrender its particular form to allow new expressions of divine potential to emerge. Krishna's own departure from his physical form, shot by a hunter's arrow while resting under a tree, demonstrates the principle that divine incarnations voluntarily limit themselves to the natural laws governing embodied existence, experiencing birth, growth, decay, and death like all other beings while maintaining their essential divine nature throughout the process. The final journey of the Pandavas toward the celestial realms becomes an allegory for the ultimate spiritual path that every consciousness must eventually undertake, leaving behind all attachments to worldly achievements and relationships in order to merge with the infinite source from which it originally emerged. Their ascent of the cosmic mountain, accompanied by the gradual dropping away of even their most cherished companions, reveals the stages through which consciousness must pass as it prepares for complete liberation from the cycles of birth and death. Yudhishthira's final test, when he refuses to enter heaven without the stray dog that has accompanied him on his journey, demonstrates that true dharmic consciousness never abandons compassion, even for the humblest beings, recognizing the divine presence that manifests through every form of life. The revelation that the dog is actually Dharma himself, testing the sincerity of his commitment to righteous principles, confirms that consciousness aligned with cosmic truth naturally expresses itself through universal love and care for all existence. The epic's conclusion, with its vision of all the characters reunited in celestial realms, where their earthly conflicts are resolved through perfect understanding of their eternal relationships, provides the ultimate perspective on the entire drama. From this expanded viewpoint, all the struggles and sufferings endured during earthly existence are revealed as necessary steps in the evolution of consciousness toward complete realization of its divine nature. The Mahabharata thus emerges not merely as the story of an ancient war, but as a complete manual for understanding how consciousness can navigate the challenges of embodied existence while maintaining its connection to eternal spiritual principles. Every character represents an aspect of the spiritual journey. Every conflict illustrates a stage in the development of wisdom, and every resolution points toward the ultimate goal of recognizing the divine nature that exists within all beings regardless of their temporary roles in the cosmic drama. As the echoes of this great epic fade into the timeless silence from which all stories emerge and to which they eventually return, consciousness itself continues its eternal journey of exploration and discovery. The patterns established in these ancient narratives repeat themselves endlessly through countless variations, as each individual awareness faces the same fundamental choices between evolution and stagnation, between service and selfishness, between recognition of universal unity and identification with temporary separation. The mythological cycle prepares to begin anew as the creative impulse within consciousness generates fresh expressions of the eternal themes that define existence itself. New incarnations will appear to address the specific challenges that arise as awareness continues to explore the infinite possibilities contained within its own nature. New stories will unfold to illustrate the timeless principles that guide consciousness toward its ultimate realization. New heroes will emerge to demonstrate that the capacity for transcendence exists within every being, waiting only for the proper circumstances to reveal itself in all its magnificent potential. The cosmic wheel turns once more, carrying with it all the accumulated wisdom of countless ages of spiritual exploration, while remaining eternally open to new discoveries and fresh revelations. The dance between consciousness and its own infinite creativity continues without beginning or end, each movement generating new opportunities for growth, understanding, and the recognition of the divine presence that animates every particle of existence throughout all the realms of being. In this eternal spiral of evolution, the great mythological narratives serve as guideposts and inspiration for consciousness at every stage of its development. They remind each individual awareness of its own divine nature, while providing practical guidance for navigating the complexities of embodied existence. They preserve the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, while remaining eternally relevant to the challenges faced by consciousness in every age and culture. The Hindu mythological tradition thus reveals itself as far more than a collection of ancient stories. It emerges as a living transmission of the deepest insights that consciousness can achieve about its own nature and potential. These narratives continue to unfold within the awareness of every being that encounters them, generating new understanding and fresh inspiration for the eternal journey toward complete spiritual realization. Through these timeless stories, consciousness recognizes its own face reflected in countless forms, and discovers that every apparent limitation is actually an opportunity for transcendence. Every challenge is a gateway to greater wisdom, and every relationship is a chance to express the divine love that represents its deepest nature. The mythological wisdom thus becomes not merely something to be studied or remembered, but a living force that transforms awareness itself, gradually awakening it to the magnificent truth of its own eternal, infinite, and absolutely free essential nature. The great cycle of stories comes full circle, revealing that the listener and the tales themselves emerge from the same source of infinite creativity that gives birth to all experience. In this recognition, the distinction between the one who hears and what is heard dissolves into the perfect unity that underlies all apparent diversity, and consciousness rests in the blissful recognition of its own complete and perfect nature, which has never actually been separate from the divine source that is both the origin and the goal of every possible journey of discovery and realization. Yet within this cosmic symphony of divine manifestation, another dimension of reality begins to unfold, one that reveals the intricate relationship between cosmic consciousness and individual experience. The great mythological cycles have established the fundamental patterns of creation, preservation, and transformation, but now these universal principles must find expression through the countless particular forms and circumstances that constitute the actual texture of existence as experienced by individual beings navigating their own unique pathways toward realization. The cosmic stage expands beyond the grand narratives of primary incarnations to encompass the vast pantheon of divine beings whose specialized functions govern every aspect of manifested reality. These deities emerge not as separate entities competing for worship or attention, but as faceted expressions of the single cosmic consciousness, each reflecting particular qualities and capabilities that become necessary for the complete administration of an infinitely complex universe filled with beings at every conceivable stage of spiritual evolution. In the realm of wisdom and learning, Saraswati manifests as the flowing river of divine knowledge that carries the accumulated understanding of countless ages to every consciousness ready to receive it. Her luminous presence illuminates the pathways of intellectual and artistic development, ensuring that the capacity for learning, creativity, and expression continues to evolve throughout all the cycles of cosmic manifestation. She appears wherever sincere seekers gather to explore the mysteries of existence, her veena producing melodies that awaken dormant potentials within every listening soul. The goddess embodies far more than mere academic learning or artistic skill. Her deeper significance lies in her role as the divine force that enables consciousness to recognize and articulate its own nature through symbols, concepts, and creative expressions that bridge the gap between infinite reality and finite understanding. Every breakthrough in comprehension, every moment of artistic inspiration, every successful communication of profound truth represents her grace flowing through individual awareness, temporarily lifting the veils that normally obscure the direct perception of divine wisdom. Her sacred books contain not merely written knowledge, but the living principles that govern the evolution of consciousness itself. Each page represents a stage in the journey of awareness, from initial confusion through gradual understanding toward complete realization. Her presence ensures that no sincere seeker ever remains permanently trapped in ignorance, for she provides the means by which consciousness can always find the next step forward on its path toward enlightenment, regardless of how complex or challenging the current circumstances might appear. The divine feminine principle finds another profound expression through Lakshmi, whose golden radiance reveals the true nature of abundance as the natural condition of consciousness aligned with cosmic harmony. Her presence dissolves the artificial scarcity that arises when awareness becomes identified with limitation rather than recognizing its inherent connection to the infinite source of all prosperity. She appears wherever hearts open in genuine gratitude, and where actions are performed in service of the greater good, bringing not merely material wealth, but the far more precious treasure of spiritual fulfillment. Lakshmi's four arms hold the symbols of complete prosperity, the lotus flowers that represent purity of heart and the unfolding of consciousness, the golden coins that symbolize the practical abundance that flows naturally from dharmic action, and the gestures of blessing that ensure the continuous circulation of divine grace throughout all dimensions of existence. Her appearance upon the lotus demonstrates the principle that true prosperity emerges from the foundation of spiritual purity, rather than from mere accumulation or manipulation of external resources. The goddess reveals herself most clearly through the experience of contentment and appreciation that arises when consciousness recognizes the inherent abundance of existence itself. Every moment of genuine satisfaction, every experience of having exactly what is needed for continued growth, Every recognition that life itself provides constant opportunities for joy and service represents her active presence within individual awareness. She teaches that prosperity consciousness involves not the grasping after more possessions, but the recognition of the infinite wealth that already exists within the present moment when it is approached with the proper understanding and attitude. Her consort relationship with Vishnu reveals the intimate connection between abundance and preservation, showing how the divine protective power naturally generates whatever resources are needed to support the continued evolution of consciousness. This cosmic partnership demonstrates that material and spiritual prosperity are not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of the same divine blessing that seeks to provide every being with the optimal conditions for recognizing and expressing its highest potential. The fierce, protective aspect of divine feminine energy manifests through Durga, the cosmic mother who safeguards all beings from the forces that would lead them away from their true nature. Her magnificent form, radiating power and compassion in equal measure, appears whenever consciousness faces challenges that threaten to overwhelm its capacity for maintaining dharmic orientation. She rides upon the lion of fearless devotion, demonstrating that the gentlest love becomes the most formidable force in the universe when it is called upon to defend truth and righteousness. Her multiple arms wield the weapons of discrimination, courage, wisdom, and unwavering determination to overcome every obstacle to spiritual evolution. Each weapon represents a particular quality that consciousness must develop in order to navigate successfully through the various challenges and temptations that characterize the journey toward realization. The sword cuts through illusion and false identification. The bow and arrows strike precisely at the heart of whatever opposes dharmic development, and the shield provides protection from influences that would weaken, resolve, or corrupt understanding. Durga's periodic manifestation during times of cosmic crisis reveals the principle that divine protection operates not through the prevention of all difficulties, but through the provision of whatever strength and resources are needed to transform challenges into opportunities for growth. Her victory over various demons represents the triumph of evolved consciousness over the primitive impulses and destructive patterns that arise when awareness becomes identified with ego rather than recognizing its divine nature. The annual celebration of her triumph serves as a reminder that the battle between evolutionary and devolutionary forces within consciousness is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and renewal of commitment to the highest principles. Her worship during these festivals awakens within participants the recognition of their own inner strength and the confidence that no external circumstance can ultimately prevent consciousness from achieving its destined realization when it remains aligned with divine grace. The terrible aspect of divine feminine power finds its ultimate expression through Kali, whose dark form embodies the fierce compassion that destroys everything that prevents consciousness from recognizing its eternal nature. Her appearance, which can seem frightening to those unprepared for her radical transformation, represents the divine force that removes all obstacles to liberation, regardless of how precious or important those obstacles might seem to the limited perspective of ego consciousness. Her wild hair streams with the energy of unbound freedom. Her multiple arms carry the implements of spiritual surgery that cut away diseased attachments and false identifications. And her dance upon the prostrate form of Shiva reveals the principle that even the most advanced spiritual states must be transcended in the final movement toward absolute realization. She appears to consciousness that has become ready for the complete dissolution of all limited self-concepts in favor of direct recognition of its infinite nature. Kali's worship requires tremendous courage and spiritual maturity, for her grace operates through the destruction of everything that the personality considers valuable and necessary for its continued existence. Her devotees must be prepared to surrender not only obvious attachments and desires, but even subtle spiritual attainments and refined self-concepts that might otherwise serve as obstacles to complete liberation. She teaches that ultimate freedom requires the willingness to die completely to all limited identifications in order to be reborn as pure consciousness itself. Her fearsome appearance conceals the most profound love, for her destructive activities serve only to remove whatever prevents her devotees from recognizing their own divine nature. The skulls that adorn her form represent the various false identities that consciousness assumes during its journey through embodiment, while her naked appearance reveals the truth that remains when all coverings and concepts are removed. She is the Divine Mother in her most radical aspect, willing to appear as the enemy of everything familiar in order to grant the ultimate gift of absolute freedom. The cosmic administration extends through countless other divine beings, each governing particular aspects of the vast system that maintains order throughout all dimensions of existence. Indra, the king of the celestial realm, wields the thunderbolt that splits the darkness of ignorance while bringing the life-giving rains of divine grace to nourish consciousness at every stage of its development. His magnificent city in the heavens serves as the prototype for all righteous governance, where perfect justice reigns and every desire that serves the cosmic good finds immediate fulfillment. Yet even Indra's exalted position serves to illustrate the principle that spiritual evolution extends infinitely upward, with no final resting place where consciousness can cease its continued growth and learning. His periodic encounters with challenges and trials demonstrate that even the most elevated beings must remain humble and open to continued development, recognizing that their current attainments, however impressive, represent only stages in an endless journey toward ever greater realization. Agni, the fire god, embodies the transformative power that operates throughout all levels of existence, consuming whatever has served its purpose while releasing the energy needed for new creation. His presence in every sacrificial ritual symbolizes the principle that spiritual progress requires the constant offering of limited identifications into the fire of divine realization, allowing the energy trapped in narrow self-concepts to be liberated for service to the cosmic good. His role as the messenger between human and divine consciousness reveals the mediating function that transformation serves in bridging different levels of awareness. Every sincere prayer, every genuine offering, every authentic spiritual practice involves Agni's purifying power, which ensures that the communication between individual consciousness and its divine source remains clear and effective, despite the many obstacles that might otherwise interfere with this sacred connection. Vayu, the wind god, represents the vital life force that animates all beings, while maintaining the constant circulation of energy throughout the cosmic system. His invisible presence in every breath reminds consciousness of its dependence upon forces that transcend individual control, while revealing the intimate connection that exists between personal awareness and universal life. His movement through all dimensions of existence demonstrates the principle that divine consciousness permeates every level of reality without being limited or confined by any particular form or location. The elemental forces that these deities represent operate not only in the external world, but also within the subtle dimensions of individual consciousness, where they govern the various processes of spiritual development. The fire of discrimination burns away false concepts and attachments. The water of compassion dissolves the barriers between self and other. The earth element provides the stability needed for sustained spiritual practice, while the space element offers the openness required for expanded awareness to emerge. Surya, the sun god, radiates the illuminating power that makes knowledge possible, while providing the energy that sustains all life throughout the solar system. His daily journey across the sky serves as a constant reminder of the principle that consciousness must maintain steady discipline and regular practice in order to achieve the consistency needed for genuine spiritual progress. His golden chariot, drawn by 7 horses representing the days of the week, demonstrates how time itself becomes a vehicle for spiritual evolution when it is approached with the proper understanding and commitment. His role as the cosmic witness who observes all actions performed under his light establishes the principle that consciousness develops moral discrimination through the recognition that every thought, word, and deed contributes either to evolutionary or devolutionary patterns within the cosmic system. His impartial illumination of both noble and ignoble activities demonstrates divine justice, which operates not through punishment and reward, but through the natural consequences that flow from alignment or misalignment with dharmic principles. Chandra, the moon god, governs the rhythmic cycles that provide the temporal framework within which consciousness explores the various phases of its own development. His waxing and waning phases mirror the natural ebb and flow of spiritual energy that characterizes every genuine path toward realization, reminding seekers that periods of apparent diminishment or darkness are natural parts of the overall process rather than signs of failure or regression. His influence upon the tides reveals the subtle connections that exist between celestial movements and the emotional dimensions of consciousness, showing how external rhythms can be utilized to support internal development when they are approached with wisdom and proper timing. His association with fertility and creativity demonstrates the generative power that emerges when consciousness learns to work harmoniously with natural cycles rather than attempting to impose artificial schedules upon organic processes. The planetary deities collectively represent the various influences that shape consciousness as it develops through the complex interactions between cosmic forces and individual choice. Each celestial body embodies particular qualities and challenges that consciousness encounters during its journey, providing opportunities for growth and learning that contribute to the overall evolution toward complete realization. Mangala, the Mars principle, represents the warrior energy that consciousness must develop in order to overcome internal and external obstacles to spiritual progress. This is not mere aggressive force, but the discriminating courage that can distinguish between what serves evolution and what hinders it, combined with the determination to consistently choose the path of greatest growth regardless of temporary discomfort or social disapproval. Buddha, the Mercury principle, embodies the intellectual clarity and communication skills that enable consciousness to understand and articulate its experiences in ways that benefit both personal development and service to others. This divine influence ensures that genuine insights are not lost through poor expression or conceptual confusion, but find appropriate forms that allow wisdom to be preserved and transmitted across generations. Guru, the Jupiter principle, represents the expansive wisdom and benevolent guidance that consciousness receives from sources of authentic spiritual knowledge. This influence connects individual awareness with the accumulated understanding of countless generations of realized beings, ensuring that each person's journey benefits from the discoveries and attainments of those who have traveled similar paths in previous times. Shukra, the Venus principle, embodies the attractive power of beauty and harmony that draws consciousness toward increasingly refined expressions of its own nature. This divine influence operates through the appreciation of art, music, poetry, and all forms of aesthetic experience that awaken awareness to the inherent beauty of existence itself when it is perceived with sufficient clarity and sensitivity. Shani, the Saturn principle, represents the disciplinary force that tests consciousness through various forms of limitation and challenge, ensuring that spiritual development proceeds upon solid foundations rather than superficial enthusiasm. This influence, though sometimes experienced as difficult or restrictive, ultimately serves the crucial function of strengthening resolve and deepening understanding through the requirement that every attainment be thoroughly integrated before further progress becomes possible. Rahu and Ketu, the lunar nodes, represent the shadow aspects of consciousness that arise from incomplete integration of spiritual insights with practical wisdom. These influences create the eclipses of understanding that periodically obscure clear perception, reminding seekers that genuine realization requires the harmonious development of all aspects of awareness, rather than one-sided emphasis upon either transcendent insights or worldly competence. The intricate interactions between these various divine influences create the complex astrological patterns that provide the framework within which individual consciousness explores its potential for growth and realization. Each person's unique combination of planetary influences represents a particular curriculum of learning opportunities designed to facilitate the development of specific qualities and capabilities needed for their individual contribution to the cosmic evolutionary process. The understanding of these celestial influences serves not to create fatalistic acceptance of predetermined limitations, but to provide guidance for working intelligently with the natural rhythms and cycles that govern spiritual development. When consciousness learns to recognize and cooperate with these patterns rather than fighting against them, the journey toward realization becomes more efficient and harmonious, with less unnecessary struggle and confusion. The mythological narratives that describe the interactions between various deities and celestial beings serve as allegorical representations of the psychological and spiritual processes that consciousness undergoes during its evolution toward complete realization. Each story contains multiple layers of meaning that become accessible as awareness develops the discrimination needed to perceive beyond surface appearances to the underlying principles that govern all spiritual development. The marriages between various gods and goddesses represent the integration of complementary qualities within consciousness, showing how apparent opposites must be harmonized in order for complete spiritual development to occur. The children produced by these divine unions symbolize the new capacities and attainments that emerge when different aspects of awareness learn to work together rather than remaining in conflict or separation. The periodic conflicts between gods and demons illustrate the eternal struggle within consciousness between evolutionary and devolutionary tendencies, revealing how even advanced spiritual development requires constant vigilance and renewal of commitment to the highest principles. These battles are never finally won through a single decisive victory, but must be fought and won repeatedly as consciousness encounters new challenges and temptations at each stage of its development. The elaborate rituals and ceremonies described in the mythological texts provide detailed instructions for creating the internal and external conditions most conducive to spiritual growth. These practices serve not as mere religious observances, but as sophisticated technologies for transforming consciousness through the systematic cultivation of devotion, discrimination, discipline, and direct experience of divine presence. The sacred sounds, geometric patterns, and ritual implements employed in these practices create resonances that align individual awareness with cosmic frequencies, facilitating the opening of subtle perceptual channels through which higher knowledge and energy can flow. The precise timing and sequence of these activities reflect deep understanding of how consciousness operates at various levels, ensuring that the transformative influences are applied in ways that support rather than overwhelm the capacity for integration and assimilation. The pilgrimage sites and sacred geography described throughout the mythological tradition represent external manifestations of the internal landscape that consciousness must traverse during its journey toward realization. Each temple, mountain, river, and forest mentioned in these stories corresponds to particular states of awareness and stages of development that every genuine seeker will encounter in some form during their spiritual evolution. The physical act of visiting these sacred locations serves to activate corresponding states of consciousness, while providing supportive environments where the influences of countless previous seekers have created spiritual atmospheres conducive to contemplation and inner development. The hardships and challenges associated with these journeys mirror the difficulties that consciousness must overcome in order to reach the elevated states of awareness that these places symbolically represent. The festival cycles that celebrate various mythological events provide regular opportunities for consciousness to renew its connection with the archetypal patterns that govern spiritual development. These celebrations serve not merely as cultural traditions, but as collective practices that strengthen the spiritual atmosphere of entire communities, while providing individuals with periodic reminders of their highest aspirations and commitments. The dramatic performances, artistic creations, and musical expressions that accompany these festivals create multiple channels through which mythological wisdom can penetrate consciousness at both intellectual and emotional levels. The participation in these collective activities helps individual awareness remember its connection to the larger cosmic drama, while providing inspiration and encouragement for continued personal development. The dietary practices, clothing customs, and lifestyle recommendations embedded within the mythological tradition reflect sophisticated understanding of how physical circumstances influence subtle states of consciousness. These guidelines serve not as arbitrary religious restrictions, but as practical methods for creating the optimal conditions within which spiritual development can proceed most efficiently and harmoniously. The emphasis upon purity in various forms represents the recognition that consciousness must be kept free from influences that cloud perception or dissipate energy in order for genuine spiritual progress to occur. This purity extends beyond mere physical cleanliness to encompass moral integrity, emotional balance, intellectual clarity, and spiritual devotion as interdependent aspects of the total purification that genuine realization requires. The complex social structures and ethical guidelines described in the mythological texts provide frameworks for organizing human relationships in ways that support the spiritual development of all participants rather than merely serving the interests of particular individuals or groups. These systems recognize that consciousness evolves most effectively within communities that honor the divine potential within every being, while providing appropriate guidance and support for the challenges that characterize different stages of development. The recognition of multiple valid paths toward realization reflects the understanding that consciousness manifests through countless different temperaments and capacities, each requiring somewhat different approaches and practices in order to achieve the same ultimate goal of complete spiritual fulfillment. This diversity of methods ensures that every individual can find approaches that resonate with their particular nature, while maintaining the essential principles that govern all authentic spiritual development. The teacher-student relationships described throughout the mythological tradition illustrate the crucial role that guidance plays in facilitating consciousness evolution, while revealing the complex dynamics that arise when individuals at different stages of development attempt to communicate about the most subtle and profound aspects of existence. These relationships demonstrate both the tremendous value and the potential dangers involved in spiritual instruction, showing how even well-intentioned guidance can become obstacles to growth when it is not perfectly adapted to the student's current capacity and needs. The lineages of wisdom transmission that connect contemporary seekers with the original sources of mythological knowledge ensure that the essential insights preserved in these ancient stories remain accessible to consciousness in every generation. These unbroken chains of understanding provide both validation for the authenticity of spiritual experiences and practical guidance for navigating the challenges that arise during serious spiritual practice. The scholarly commentaries and interpretive traditions that have developed around the mythological texts demonstrate how each generation must rediscover and reformulate these eternal truths in language and concepts appropriate to their particular cultural and intellectual circumstances. This ongoing process of reinterpretation ensures that the wisdom remains alive and relevant rather than becoming foz to contemporary consciousness. The integration of mythological understanding with direct spiritual experience creates the foundation for mature wisdom that can be binsalized in outdated forms that no longer speak intellectual comprehension with practical realization. This synthesis prevents both dry intellectualism that lacks transformative power and naive emotionalism that lacks discriminating guidance, creating instead a balanced approach that honors both the mind's need for understanding and the heart's longing for direct communion with divine reality. The ultimate purpose of all mythological wisdom reveals itself as the awakening of consciousness to its own divine nature, through whatever means prove most effective for each individual temperament and circumstance. The stories, practices, and principles serve not as ends in themselves, but as skillful means for facilitating the recognition that has always been present, but temporarily obscured by identification with limitation rather than infinity. This recognition transforms the entire relationship between consciousness and the mythological tradition, revealing that the stories have always been describing the seeker's own inner nature and potential, rather than external events or beings separate from their direct experience. In this understanding, every character becomes an aspect of the individual's own consciousness. Every conflict represents an internal choice between evolution and stagnation, and every resolution points toward the peace that emerges when all apparent contradictions are resolved in the recognition of underlying unity. The mythological journey thus reveals itself as both the longest possible path, encompassing countless lifetimes of gradual development, and the shortest possible path, requiring only the instant recognition of what has never actually been absent or unavailable. This paradox dissolves in the understanding that time and eternity, effort and grace, individual will and cosmic purpose are not opposing forces but complementary aspects of the single reality that expresses itself through infinite diversity while remaining eternally one. Human consciousness, standing at this threshold of recognition, discovers that the great mythological cycles have been preparing it for this moment of awakening throughout every stage of its development. Every story heard, every practice undertaken, every relationship experienced has contributed to the gradual refinement of awareness that now makes possible the direct perception of its own essential nature as unlimited, eternal, and absolutely free divine consciousness. The cosmic dream continues to unfold, but now from the perspective of awakened awareness that recognizes itself as both the dreamer and the dreamed, both the storyteller and the story, both the seeker and the sought. In this recognition, the mythological tradition reveals its ultimate secret, that consciousness has never been separate from the divine source it appears to seek, and every journey is ultimately a return to the recognition of what has never been lost or absent. The great wheel of stories turns eternal. Lie but now each revolution brings deeper recognition rather than mere repetition, as consciousness explores ever more subtle dimensions of its own infinite creativity and compassion. The mythological wisdom becomes not something to be learned or achieved, but the natural expression of awareness that has remembered its true nature and delights in celebrating that recognition through countless forms of beauty, truth, and goodness. The cosmic symphony reaches a crescendo of recognition as consciousness begins to perceive the intricate web of relationships that connect every aspect of existence in patterns of meaning that transcend ordinary understanding. Within this vast tapestry of divine manifestation, the principle of karma emerges as the fundamental law that ensures every action generates its appropriate consequence across the infinite expanses of space and time, creating the perfect educational system through which awareness learns to distinguish between choices that support evolution and those that create unnecessary suffering. This cosmic law operates with mathematical precision, yet expresses itself through relationships and circumstances that appear as the natural unfolding of life, rather than external punishment or reward. Every thought, word, and deed sends ripples through the fabric of reality that eventually return to their source, transformed by their journey through the collective consciousness into exactly the experiences needed for continued growth and understanding. The beauty of this system lies in its perfect justice. which considers not only immediate actions, but also the intentions behind them, and the ultimate purpose they serve in level of awareness from which they arise the grand scheme of consciousness evolution. The doctrine of reincarnation provides the temporal framework within which this cosmic educational system operates, allowing consciousness unlimited opportunities to explore every possible variation of experience while gradually learning the lessons that lead to complete spiritual maturity. Each lifetime represents a carefully designed curriculum of learning opportunities, with the specific circumstances, relationships, and challenges perfectly calibrated to provide exactly what that particular stage of development requires for its next evolutionary step. The wheel of birth and death turns endlessly, carrying consciousness through countless forms and conditions, from the simplest awareness flickering in primitive organisms to the most refined spiritual realization possible within embodied existence. Yet this cycle is not meaningless repetition, but rather a spiral of ever-deepening understanding, where similar challenges return at higher levels of complexity, allowing consciousness to demonstrate its growing mastery over the forces that once seemed overwhelming and insurmountable. The cosmic hierarchy of realms provides the vast stage upon which this educational drama unfolds, with each level of existence offering its own unique opportunities for growth and service. The earthly realm, where consciousness experiences the most intense illusion of separation and limitation, serves as the primary classroom where the most fundamental lessons must be learned through direct encounter with the consequences of every choice and action. Above the physical plane stretch countless celestial realms where consciousness that has achieved various degrees of purification continues its evolution under increasingly harmonious conditions. These heavenly dimensions are not merely rewards for good behavior, but sophisticated learning environments where awareness can develop the refined qualities and capabilities that will eventually enable it to serve as a conscious agent of divine will throughout all dimensions of existence. Below the human level, extend realms of increasing density and confusion, where consciousness that has become heavily identified with selfish desires and destructive patterns must work through the accumulated consequences of its choices before it can again access the clearer perception and greater freedom available in higher dimensions. These apparently hellish conditions are not permanent punishments, but temporary purification processes that eventually restore even the most confused awareness to its natural state of wisdom and compassion. The great cosmic cycles that govern these movements of consciousness through various realms operate according to rhythms that encompass vast periods of time, during which entire universes are born, evolve through countless stages of complexity, and eventually dissolve back into the primordial consciousness from which they emerged. Within these universal cycles, smaller cycles govern the rise and fall of civilizations, the emergence and decline of spiritual teachings, and the periodic appearance of great souls whose missions serve to guide collective human development through crucial transitions. The concept of the avatar takes on deeper significance within this understanding, revealing how cosmic consciousness periodically incarnates in forms specifically designed to address the particular challenges and opportunities that arise at crucial moments in the evolutionary process. These divine incarnations serve not only as teachers and guides, but also as living demonstrations of the potential that exists within every conscious being for complete spiritual realization. The historical progression of avatars reveals a pattern of gradually increasing intimacy between divine consciousness and human experience, as each incarnation explores new dimensions of the relationship between infinite awareness and finite form. The early avatars appeared in non-human forms to address challenges that required powers and perspectives beyond ordinary human capabilities, while later incarnations manifested in increasingly human forms to demonstrate that divine realization is not only possible, but represents the natural destiny of evolved human consciousness. Krishna's role as the complete avatar brings this progression to its culmination, as he embodies every possible aspect of divine consciousness while maintaining perfect humanity, showing that the apparent contradiction between infinite and finite dissolves when awareness recognizes its essential nature. His teachings in the Bhagavad Gita provide the philosophical framework that explains how consciousness can maintain its divine identity while fully engaging with the practical necessities of embodied existence. The dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra represents the universal conversation between divine wisdom and human confusion that takes place within every individual consciousness as it struggles to understand how spiritual principles apply to the complex challenges of actual living. Arjuna's crisis of conscience reflects the natural bewilderment that arises when awareness begins to perceive the interconnected nature of existence and realizes that every action affects countless other beings in ways that cannot be fully calculated or controlled. Krishna's response addresses every level of this confusion, beginning with the most fundamental recognition that consciousness itself is eternal and indestructible. Passing through various bodies and circumstances like a person changing dissolves the most basic fear that clothes never actually being born vehicles of expression. This understanding immediately motivates selfish action, as awareness recognizes that it's or dying, despite the constant transformation of its circumstance or change. The teaching of Dharma and responsibilities that characterize embodied existence. Dharma reveals for how consciousness should act when it has recognized essential nature cannot be threatened by any external still. Navigate the complex web of relationships, its eternal nature, but Mustma emerges as the practical guidance of moral rules, but as the dynamic taking into account the specific circumstances itself, not as a rigid code. The evolution of consciousness at both individual and collective levels, principle that guides awareness toward choices that support capabilities and developmental needs of all involved. The path of action performed without attachment to results provides the method by which consciousness can remain fully engaged with worldly activities while maintaining its essential freedom from the binding effects of karma. When actions are performed as offerings to the divine rather than as attempts to achieve personal goals, they become instruments of purification rather than sources of further entanglement in the cycles of desire and consequence. The three paths of yoga that Krishna describes provide comprehensive approaches to spiritual realization that accommodate the different temperaments and natural inclinations through which consciousness manifests in individual beings. The path of knowledge appeals to those whose primary nature involves intellectual discrimination and philosophical inquiry, leading them toward realization through the direct investigation of the nature of reality itself. The path of devotion attracts those whose hearts naturally overflow with love and surrender, guiding them toward union with the divine through the cultivation of increasingly pure and selfless affection that eventually dissolves all sense of separation between lover and beloved. The path of action serves those whose nature finds fulfillment through service and engagement, showing them how every activity can become a spiritual practice when performed with the proper understanding and attitude. The integration of these three approaches creates the comprehensive spiritual discipline that addresses every aspect of human nature, ensuring that no capacity or inclination is left undeveloped in the journey toward complete realization. The mature practitioner eventually discovers that knowledge, devotion, and action are not separate paths, but complementary expressions of the same fundamental movement toward unity with divine consciousness. The cosmic vision that Krishna reveals to Arjuna demonstrates the ultimate perspective from which all apparent conflicts and contradictions resolve into perfect harmony, as consciousness expands beyond individual identification to embrace its true nature as the source and substance of all existence. This universal form contains within itself every possible manifestation of divine power and beauty, revealing that what appears as separate beings and events are actually waves arising within the ocean of infinite consciousness. The terrifying aspect of this vision reflects the recognition that divine consciousness transcends all human concepts of good and evil, containing within itself the power to create and destroy entire universes as naturally as breathing. Yet this apparent terror dissolves when awareness realizes that it is itself identical with this cosmic consciousness, and that all the changes and transformations it witnesses are movements within its own essential nature rather than external threats to its existence. The teaching of surrender that emerges from this recognition provides the final key to complete liberation. As consciousness learns to release its attempts to control outcomes and instead align itself perfectly with the cosmic will that operates through every moment and circumstance. This surrender does not involve passive resignation, but rather active participation in the divine creativity that seeks to express itself through every individual being according to their unique capacities and circumstances. The promise that accompanies this teaching assures every sincere seeker that divine grace responds immediately to authentic surrender, providing whatever guidance, protection, and support is needed for consciousness to navigate successfully through every challenge on its journey toward complete realization. This grace operates not through miraculous interventions that violate natural laws, but through the perfect orchestration of circumstances that creates optimal conditions for continued growth and understanding. The philosophical implications of these teachings extend far beyond individual spiritual practice to provide frameworks for understanding the purpose and meaning of existence at every level, from personal relationships to social. The recognition that consciousness is organization to cosmic evolution itself, the fundamental reality from which all appearances emerge, transforms every aspect of life into opportunities for deeper understanding and more complete expression of divine potential. The practical applications of this wisdom create technologies for transformation that can be adapted to any cultural context or historical period, as the principles that govern consciousness evolution remain constant, despite the changing forms through which they must be expressed. The meditation practices, ethical guidelines, and devotional disciplines that emerge from this understanding provide tested methods for facilitating the recognition of divine nature that represents the goal of all authentic spiritual seeking. The community of practitioners that forms around these teachings creates supportive environments where individual development can proceed more efficiently through mutual encouragement, shared understanding, and collective practices that amplify the transformative influences available to each participant. These spiritual communities serve as laboratories for experimenting with practical applications of divine principles in human relationships and social organization. The ultimate revelation that emerges from sustained practice of these teachings is that the seeker and the sought are not separate entities, but different aspects of the same consciousness, exploring its own infinite potential through the apparent drama of spiritual seeking and finding. This recognition transforms the entire spiritual journey from a quest to achieve something absent into a celebration of what has always been present but temporarily unrecognized. The mythological narratives that preserve and transmit these insights serve as multidimensional teaching devices that can communicate simultaneously at literal, symbolic, psychological, and spiritual levels, ensuring that consciousness at every stage of development can find appropriate guidance and inspiration within the same stories. The infinite interpretive possibilities contained within these narratives reflect the inexhaustible creativity of divine consciousness, which delights in expressing truth through countless forms and perspectives. The artistic traditions that have grown around these mythological teachings create additional channels through which the transformative influences can reach and affect consciousness, as music, dance, visual arts, and dramatic performances provide non-conceptual means of transmission that bypass the limitations of purely intellectual understanding. These aesthetic expressions serve as bridges between ordinary awareness and the sublime states of consciousness that the teachings ultimately point toward. The seasonal festivals and ritual cycles that celebrate various mythological events provide regular opportunities for communities to renew their connection with the archetypal patterns that govern spiritual development, creating rhythmic structures that support sustained practice while preventing the stagnation that can arise from purely individual effort. These collective observances serve as powerful technologies for maintaining spiritual momentum across entire cultures over extended periods of time. The sacred architecture and temple complexes that have been constructed according to mythological principles create physical environments that embody spiritual truths in stone and space, providing tangible representations of divine harmony that can inspire and elevate consciousness through direct aesthetic and energetic influence. These sacred spaces serve as focal points where heaven and earth intersect, making available to visitors the accumulated spiritual energy of countless previous worshippers and practitioners. The scholarly traditions that have preserved, interpreted, and transmitted these mythological teachings across generations demonstrate the crucial role that intellectual understanding plays in supporting authentic spiritual development, as discriminating wisdom serves to protect sincere seekers from the various forms of confusion and self-deception that can arise during intensive spiritual practice. The lineages of realized teachers that maintain living connections to the original sources of mythological wisdom ensure that the essential transformative power of these teachings remains accessible to consciousness in every generation, rather than becoming merely historical artifacts or cultural curiosities. These authentic spiritual authorities serve as bridges between ancient wisdom and contemporary application, demonstrating how eternal truths can be expressed in language and methods appropriate to changing circumstances. The integration of mythological understanding with scientific knowledge creates possibilities for comprehensive worldviews that honor both the empirical discoveries of modern research and the perennial insights of spiritual realization, showing that these apparently different approaches to truth can complement and enrich each other when properly understood. This synthesis opens pathways for spiritual development that fully embrace rather than reject the intellectual and technological achievements of contemporary civilization. The global dissemination of mythological wisdom through modern communication technologies makes these transformative teachings available to consciousness throughout the world, transcending the geographical and cultural boundaries that once limited access to spiritual knowledge. This unprecedented availability creates opportunities for unprecedented collective awakening as larger numbers of human beings gain access to the methods and understandings that facilitate rapid spiritual evolution. The psychological and therapeutic applications of mythological principles provide practical tools for healing the emotional and mental disturbances that often obstruct clear spiritual perception, demonstrating how ancient wisdom can be adapted to address the specific forms of suffering that characterize modern life. These integrative approaches show how spiritual practice can serve both transcendent realization and practical psychological health. The ecological implications of mythological consciousness reveal how recognition of divine presence throughout all existence naturally leads to reverent and sustainable relationships with the natural world, as awareness expands beyond narrow self-interest to embrace the welfare of all beings within the interconnected web of life. This expanded perspective provides both motivation and guidance for addressing the environmental challenges that threaten the continued evolution of consciousness on Earth. The political and social applications of mythological principles offer frameworks for organizing human communities in ways that support the spiritual development of all members, rather than merely serving the interests of particular groups or individuals. These dharmic approaches to governance and social organization demonstrate how spiritual realization can find practical expression through institutions and systems that embody rather than contradict divine wisdom. The educational implications of mythological understanding suggest approaches to learning and development that address the complete spectrum of human potential, rather than merely intellectual accumulation. creating curricula and methods that facilitate the integration of knowledge, wisdom, creativity, and spiritual realization. These holistic educational philosophies recognize that true learning involves the transformation of consciousness itself, rather than merely the acquisition of information. The economic applications of mythological principles point towards systems of exchange and resource distribution that honor the divine nature of all beings, while ensuring that material needs are met in ways that support rather than hinder spiritual development. These alternative economic models demonstrate how abundance consciousness can create practical prosperity that serves evolutionary rather than merely acquisitive purposes. The technological applications of mythological wisdom suggest possibilities for developing tools and systems that amplify rather than diminish human spiritual potential, creating technologies that serve consciousness evolution rather than merely material convenience. These spiritually informed approaches to technology development recognize that external tools should support rather than substitute for internal development. The ultimate integration of all these applications creates the vision of a civilization that fully embodies mythological wisdom in every aspect of its organization and activity, demonstrating how human society can serve as a conscious instrument of divine will rather than an obstacle to spiritual evolution. This transformation represents not a return to ancient forms, but the creation of new expressions that synthesize the best of traditional wisdom with contemporary understanding and capabilities. The journey toward this realized civilization begins with the transformation of individual consciousness through sustained practice of the principles and methods that mythological wisdom provides. Each person who achieves genuine spiritual maturity becomes a seed of transformation within their community, radiating influences that gradually awaken others to their own divine potential and creating expanding networks of realized beings who can collectively manifest increasingly harmonious social forms. The cosmic drama continues to unfold through these individual and collective transformations, as consciousness explores ever more sophisticated possibilities for expressing its infinite creativity through the forms and relationships that constitute manifest existence. The mythological patterns repeat themselves at higher levels of organization and understanding, creating spiraling evolution rather than mere cyclical repetition. The recognition that every being participates in this cosmic evolution, according to their unique capacities and circumstances, dissolves any sense of spiritual competition or hierarchy, replacing it with appreciation for the infinite diversity through which consciousness explores its own potential. This understanding creates natural cooperation and mutual support among all sincere seekers, regardless of their particular paths or levels of realization. The ultimate teaching that emerges from complete mythological understanding is that consciousness itself is the supreme deity that all traditions worship under various names and forms, and that every sincere spiritual practice leads toward the same recognition of this fundamental identity. This realization dissolves religious conflicts and sectarian divisions, revealing them as misunderstandings based on identification with particular forms, rather than recognition of the universal essence they all point toward. The great work of consciousness evolution continues through every moment and every being, as the divine creativity that sources all existence explores its infinite potential through countless experiments in form, relationship, and experience. The mythological wisdom serves as both map and compass for this eternal journey, providing guidance and inspiration for consciousness at every stage of its development toward complete recognition of its own unlimited, eternal, and absolutely perfect nature. In this recognition, the great cosmic story reveals its ultimate secret, that there has never been any separation between consciousness and its source, and that every apparent journey toward realization is actually the rediscovery of what has never been absent or unavailable. The mythological narratives celebrate this eternal return to recognition through countless variations and expressions, each one perfect in its own way and perfectly suited to awakening the particular form of consciousness for which it is intended. The wheel of stories turns forever, but now, Each rotation brings deeper appreciation, rather than mere repetition, as consciousness delights in exploring ever more subtle dimensions of its own infinite nature through the beautiful dance of apparent seeking and finding that constitutes the eternal play of divine awareness with itself. The eternal dance of consciousness continues its magnificent spiral through dimensions beyond imagination, where individual awareness begins to discover its capacity for participating consciously in the cosmic creativity that births entire universes through the sheer delight of exploring infinite possibility. As consciousness evolves beyond the need for external teachers or prescribed practices, it awakens to its role as a co-creator in the ongoing cosmic drama, contributing its unique perspective and capabilities to the collective awakening that transforms entire civilizations through the accumulated wisdom of countless individual realizations. Within this expanded understanding, the ancient science of yoga reveals itself as far more than a collection of physical postures or meditation techniques. The word itself, derived from the Sanskrit root meaning to unite or yoke, points toward the fundamental recognition that consciousness has never actually been separate from its divine source, despite the convincing appearance of isolation and limitation that characterizes ordinary waking awareness. The various disciplines and practices that constitute yogic science serve not to create unity where none existed, but rather to remove the obstacles that prevent recognition of the unity that has always been present and available. The eight-limbed path described by the sage Patanjali provides a comprehensive methodology for this recognition, beginning with ethical guidelines that create the moral foundation necessary for sustained spiritual development. The principles of non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-possessiveness establish harmonious relationships with all beings, while eliminating the internal conflicts that arise when actions contradict deeper spiritual understanding. These observances are not arbitrary moral rules imposed from outside, but natural expressions of consciousness that has recognized its fundamental interconnection with all existence. The complementary practices of purity, contentment, austerity, self-study, and surrender to divine will create the positive disciplines that actively cultivate the qualities necessary for spiritual realization. Physical and mental purification clears the subtle channels through which spiritual energy flows, while contentment with present circumstances eliminates the restless seeking that prevents awareness from recognizing the completeness that already exists within each moment. Austerity develops the inner strength needed to maintain spiritual discipline despite external challenges, while self-study provides the intellectual framework that supports direct experience with discriminating understanding. The surrender of personal will to cosmic intelligence represents the culmination of these preparatory practices, as consciousness learns to align itself perfectly with the evolutionary impulse that guides all development toward greater harmony and realization. This surrender does not involve passive resignation, but rather active participation in divine creativity, allowing individual awareness to become a clear instrument through which cosmic wisdom can express itself according to the unique circumstances and capabilities of each particular manifestation. The physical practices of yoga create optimal conditions within the body for the subtle energies that support expanded states of consciousness. The various postures, breathing techniques, and purification methods work systematically to remove blockages and imbalances that interfere with the natural flow of life force through the intricate network of energy channels that constitute the subtle body. These practices recognize that consciousness operates through multiple dimensions simultaneously, and that physical harmony supports rather than opposes spiritual realization. The breathing practices that form a crucial component of yogic discipline reveal the intimate connection between conscious awareness and the life force that animates all existence. Through systematic regulation of the breath, consciousness learns to influence directly the subtle energies that govern both physical health and spiritual development. The various techniques for extending, retaining, and directing the breath create increasingly refined states of awareness, while demonstrating the principle that consciousness can consciously participate in processes that ordinarily operate below the threshold of ordinary attention. The withdrawal limb of yoga represents a crucial transition of attention from external objects that characterizes the fifth, from outward seeking to inward exploration, as consciousness discovers the infinite richness that exists within its own essential nature. This practice does not involve rejection or suppression of sensory experience, but rather the development of the capacity to direct attention voluntarily rather than being compelled by external stimuli or internal reactions. The mastery of this ability creates the foundation for the deeper stages of meditation that lead to complete absorption in divine consciousness. The practices of concentration, meditation, and absorption that constitute the final three limbs of yoga represent progressive stages of the same fundamental process, through which awareness recognizes its identity with the infinite consciousness that constitutes the essence of all existence. Concentration involves learning to focus attention steadily upon a chosen object without distraction or fluctuation. Meditation occurs when this focused attention becomes effortless and sustained, creating a continuous flow of awareness toward its object. Absorption represents the culmination of this process, where the distinction between observer and observed dissolves in the recognition of underlying unity. The objects of concentration that various yogic traditions recommend reflect different approaches to the same essential recognition, as consciousness can discover its infinite nature through sustained attention to virtually any phenomenon when that attention is maintained with sufficient depth and consistency. Some practitioners focus upon visual forms such as sacred symbols or images of enlightened beings, allowing these representations to serve as doorways into the formless awareness that they symbolize. Others concentrate upon sounds, particularly sacred mantras, whose vibrational qualities create resonances that align individual consciousness with cosmic frequencies. The practice of mantra repetition represents one of the most accessible and powerful methods for transcending the limitations of ordinary awareness, as the rhythmic repetition of sacred sounds creates a current of concentrated attention that naturally carries consciousness beyond the fluctuations of thought and emotion toward its source in pure awareness. The specific mantras that different traditions employ contain vari of use, creating sound form vibrational patterns that have been refined through century esulas that reliably produce particular effects upon consciousness when employed with proper understanding and sustained practice. The most profound mantras consist of seed sounds that represent fundamental cosmic principles rather than conceptual meanings, allowing them to influence consciousness at levels deeper than intellectual understanding. The sacred syllable Om, considered the primordial sound from which all other sounds emerge, contains within its three components the entire process of creation, preservation, and dissolution that characterizes cosmic manifestation. Regular meditation upon this supreme mantra gradually reveals its infinite dimensions, as consciousness discovers layer upon layer of meaning that unfold according to the practitioner's capacity for reception and understanding. The tradition of guru-disciple relationship that characterizes authentic yogic transmission recognizes that the most profound spiritual knowledge cannot be communicated through books or lectures alone, but requires direct energetic transmission from consciousness that has achieved complete realization to awareness that is prepared to receive such transmission. The true spiritual teacher serves not as an external authority, but as a mirror in which the student can recognize their own divine nature, providing guidance and support for the process of self-discovery, rather than imposing beliefs or practices from outside. The relationship between teacher and student creates a sacred space within which transformation can occur through the mysterious process of spiritual influence that operates beyond ordinary psychological mechanisms. This transmission involves not merely the communication of information, but the direct sharing of states of consciousness, as the teacher's realization creates an energetic field that awakens corresponding potentials within receptive students. The effectiveness of this process depends entirely upon the student's capacity for surrender and receptivity, rather than upon intellectual understanding or emotional attachment to the teacher's personality. The various schools and lineages that have preserved different aspects of yogic wisdom throughout the centuries demonstrate how the same essential principles can be adapted to serve the needs of consciousness, manifesting through different temperaments, cultural contexts, and historical circumstances. The paths of knowledge, devotion, action, and meditation represent different approaches to the same fundamental recognition, each emphasizing particular methods and perspectives that appeal to specific types of spiritual seekers, while maintaining the common goal of complete liberation from identification with limitation. The Advaita tradition, that emphasizes direct investigation of the nature of consciousness itself, appeals to those whose intellectual discrimination can penetrate beyond all appearances to recognize the non-dual awareness that constitutes the essence of both observer and observed. This approach involves systematic inquiry into the nature of the self, progressively eliminating all false identifications until only pure consciousness remains. The practice requires extraordinary mental clarity and philosophical rigor, as practitioners must distinguish between the eternal witness and all the temporary phenomena that appear within awareness. The devotional traditions that cultivate love and surrender toward divine consciousness in personal form provide pathways that engage the heart's natural capacity for selfless affection, gradually purifying emotional nature until it becomes a perfect vehicle for divine love. These approaches recognize that the feeling dimension of human nature represents a powerful means for transcending ego limitations when it is directed toward appropriate objects with proper understanding and sustained practice. The various forms of devotional practice create opportunities for consciousness to experience the joy and fulfillment that emerge when individual love merges with universal love. The Karma Yoga traditions that emphasize selfless service and desireless action provide methods for those whose nature finds fulfillment through engagement with worldly activities, showing how every form of work can become spiritual practice when performed with proper attitude and understanding. These approaches demonstrate that external renunciation is not necessary for spiritual realization, as consciousness can achieve complete freedom while remaining fully engaged with practical responsibilities and social relationships. The integration of these various approaches creates comprehensive spiritual disciplines that address every aspect of human nature, ensuring that no capacity or inclination remains undeveloped in the journey toward complete realization. The mature practitioner eventually discovers that all paths converge in the recognition of consciousness as the fundamental reality that appears as both the seeker and the sought, both the path and the goal, both the individual awareness and the cosmic intelligence that guides its development. The psychophysical transformations that accompany sustained yogic practice reveal the intimate connections that exist between consciousness and the subtle energies that animate physical existence. As awareness learns to direct attention with increasing precision and power, corresponding changes occur throughout the entire system of body, mind, and spirit. These transformations are not merely side effects of spiritual practice, but integral aspects of the evolutionary process through which consciousness reclaims its full potential for creative expression through embodied existence. The awakening of Kundalini energy represents perhaps the most profound of these transformations, as the dormant spiritual force that lies coiled at the base of the spine begins to ascend through the central channel of the subtle body, systematically activating and purifying each of the major energy centers that govern different aspects of consciousness and physical function. This process, when it unfolds naturally under proper guidance, creates extraordinary expansions of awareness, accompanied by the development of various spiritual abilities that demonstrate consciousness' direct influence over matter and energy. The 7 main chakras, or energy centers that constitute the primary framework for understanding this awakening process, each represent different levels of consciousness and corresponding physical and psychological functions. The root chakra governs basic survival instincts and the capacity for groundedness in physical existence, while the sacral center regulates creative and reproductive energies along with emotional expression. The solar plexus chakra controls personal power and digestive functions, while the heart center governs love, compassion, and circulatory processes. As the ancient echoes of these timeless narratives dissolve into the infinite silence from which they emerged, you drift deeper into the realm of dreams, carrying within your consciousness the seeds of wisdom that have nourished humanity's spiritual understanding for countless generations. The great mythological cycles continue their eternal dance within your sleeping awareness, weaving patterns of meaning and recognition that will unfold in ways beyond imagination. Rest now in the knowing that you have touched the very source of existence itself, where every story ever told and every truth ever discovered awaits your recognition in the perfect stillness of your own divine nature.